How's it going, everyone? It's Javi here from Weather Sponge 5000. Today is July 7th, 2018. It is approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and as of right now, we're looking at Hurricane Beryl, which is roaming around the Atlantic just north of the equator, and it is probably about several hundred miles, maybe even several thousand miles away from the Lesser Antilles. As you could see, Hurricane Beryl, as the name states, is now a hurricane. Before, it was expected to remain mainly a weak tropical storm as it was roaming to the west, but now it seemed like it strengthened a lot more than the forecast models expected. As you can see, it looks much more organized than it was yesterday. Yesterday, it just looked like a disorganized area of thunderstorms, but now it looks like the area of thunderstorms is organized. You can see some rotation within the hurricane. As you could see, it is especially noted that in the the western side of the storm, there's a lot more thunderstorms. And you might not notice based on this map because the map is very zoomed in, but this storm is very small and it's competing for one of the smallest hurricanes in Atlantic history, as the wind field is only 50 miles across. And because the storm is small, it could be harder to forecast, because when we have small storms like this, it's usually more difficult to forecast because it could either rapidly intensify or it could rapidly weaken. And why I say that is because it could rapidly intensify because it absorbs less air around what's surrounding the storm, which means that it's less likely to absorb any dry air or get basically steered by any wind shear. And it's also difficult to forecast these small storms because there's not much outer bands or outer clouds or much of a huge outflow to show where the direction of the winds are basically kind of steering this storm, because the outflow gives a good idea where a storm would usually go based on the direction it's going. But with these small storms, they're just so small that the outflow is really basically shielding itself in the small storm and staying within a small area. So we can't see ahead of time where the outflow clouds are going, which makes these small storms especially difficult to forecast. But we'll have to see what this thing does, and the forecast models mainly have a good idea where this hurricane is headed. So here's the current track of it. Right now, Hurricane Beryl is 80 miles per hour with wind gusts peaking at 100. And as you can see, it's expected to stay at a relatively steady wind speed, not really strengthening much, only strengthening about 5 miles per hour from today, which is early Saturday to early Sunday. So it's expected to remain the same. There are some computer models showing that it will strengthen more, maybe to a Cat 2, and there are some that are expecting it to weaken earlier than expected. But what most computer models could agree on is that this thing is going to weaken as it moves more towards the west, because and I'm gonna show you right now, because there's gonna be a lot of dry air that's ahead of this, that's right over the Caribbean, and that's gonna basically weaken this as it moves more towards the east, and it's gonna be very difficult to keep the storm alive. But however, we already have watches posted for the Lesser Antilles. We have a hurricane watch in one of the islands, and then we have 2 tropical storm watches just south of where the eye is expected to hit, and just a little bit more north of where the eye is going to hit. So for this storm, the north side of the storm is going to get the most impacted, even if this dissipates by the time it reaches the Lesser Antilles, because the trade winds of the Hadley cell always go from east to west. So it's going to favor the northern side of the storm, since the winds always go from east to west in the northern side of the storm in the northern hemisphere. So even if this entirely dissipates by the time it reaches the Lesser Antilles, which is certainly a possibility, there's still going to be possibly tropical storm force winds, especially in the northern side. So keep that in mind if you reside near the Lesser Antilles, or you're planning to go there on vacation, because even you might not be out of the woods even if this entirely weakens by the time it gets to you. But however, this could strengthen also, so this may be something to keep an eye on, especially since they dealt with a lot of hurricanes the season prior with Hurricane Jose, Hurricane Irma, and having another hurricane. Although it might be weak, any hurricane could cause damage, so make sure to keep an eye out if you're in the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and even the island of Hispaniola in the future, even if this ends up being dissipating by the time it gets to you. So it's good to keep an eye on that. Next storm we're looking at, which is closer to home, is Tropical Depression 3, which was in Invest earlier, Invest 96, but then strengthened into, I wouldn't say strengthened, but it was named into a tropical depression after the National Hurricane Center started to notice convection within this storm. As you can see, it's very hard to tell, and you can see over the past several hours, the thunderstorms have been less intense. There seems to be less convection as there's a lot of dry air to the north of this storm, right around here where I'm pointing the mouse. As you can see, the thunderstorms are starting to dissipate, just trying to stay alive, but you could just see slight convection based on the clouds, especially on the northern side. I would say the eye is right around here. The winds are about 30 miles per hour, and this storm is having a difficult time developing, of course, because there's a lot of dry air, but it's expected to get less intense as this cold front that's just to the north of it moves out, and we're going to see more favorable conditions as the days go on. So I'm going to show you the Atlantic analysis right now to give you a good idea of what's happening with this storm. As you can see, there's a cold front dropping through northeast. So this cold front was expected to basically steer Tropical Depression 3 right out to sea, but it seems like Tropical Depression 3 was just a little bit more south than the computer models expected. So it's basically gonna meander, and it's gonna basically be in a blocking pattern where this Bermuda high that's right in the middle of the Atlantic, and these high pressures that are just centered around the Great Lakes region, it's going to be in a trapping pattern where Tropical Depression 3 won't really have a defined steering flow to really push it out to sea or push it towards one direction. And with these kinds of storms, it's really hard to predict where they will go, because any minuscule changes in the ridges could make a major difference of where this can go, and it's going to be difficult to forecast where it goes. However, there is a forecast track of this, but like I said, it's very uncertain with these kinds of storms, so definitely do not take this as gospel, because this is these storms are very difficult to predict, the storms that meander around over a certain area. And I'm gonna show you the track of this as soon as it loads, and then you could see that it's expected to strengthen into a hurricane by the time it's Tuesday and Wednesday. And the reason why is because it's basically going to be trapped between two high pressure systems. The dry air should weaken, or there won't be much dry air to really filter in, since there's not really any cold fronts nearby that is going to break apart the thunderstorms. And it's basically going to be trapped between two high pressure systems, which should improve the outflow of this low pressure that's meandering. And it should also increase convection, since all the higher pressure is going to move towards the low pressure, and the water temperatures right around just south of North Carolina are much warmer than average, already hitting the 80-85 degree range, which is more than enough fuel to strengthen this tropical depression. And there's not just going to be enough wind shear or any kind of upper level winds that are going to break the thunderstorms apart. So it's definitely something to watch. It's unlikely that it's going to hit US land, but like we said, meandering storms are very difficult to predict, so make sure to stay tuned. Rip currents are definitely a risk in the East Coast, and yeah, definitely stay tuned for this. So thank you guys for watching. That's the whole report for today, and subscribe for more weather, and I hope you have a great night.